Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
You are in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as business leaders face regarding technology, customer expectations, and quickly changing markets. This program is about what it means to reach short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. This is program 183, Lens of Appreciation, where we will explore the power of connection through gratitude. We're talking with John Isreal, founder of the Mr. Thank You Project, which is a global movement. The results and lessons that John has learned have been featured on ABC News, Fox News, Pop Sugar, MarthaStewart.com, as well as leading him to be on stage at TEDx. John, welcome to our program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. Now, have you always, we're going to just go way back. Have you always had a knack for recognizing somebody else's contributions in a situation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely not. We all have experiences when we look in our past and how we got to be where we are today. And this whole journey really started back when I was a 19-year-old college student selling Cutco knives house to house. And I had this really remarkable experience with a customer where I had, I'd sat down with her, and her name was Cindy, and she was a wonderful lady, and she purchased a modest amount of product from me, and she was a single mom, and her boys had moved out of the house, and we just said, we had a great connection. We just really got to know each other. And then, 24 hours later, she calls me to cancel her order. And I was kind of blown away, because everyone here, we all run a business or we're involved in them to some degree. So we know there's fallout, we know there's attrition, we know people buy something and sometimes return it. And that's just the nature of business. That was the first time that had ever happened to me. So I didn't know what to do. And I said, is there something I did or something I said? What can I do here? And she's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I just have to cancel. That's it. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't stop thinking about it for the next few days. And I was just really kind of overwhelmed with it. Like, did I do something wrong? We have that happen sometimes. And so I don't know what compelled me to do this, but this is really where it started. I, for some reason, decided to write her a thank you card. And what I wrote was, essentially, hey, her name was Cynthia. I said, hey, Cynthia, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to meet with me the other day. I really enjoyed getting to learn about you and your boys that you're so proud of, and getting to meet your parrot. She had a parrot she loved too. So, and I just really wanted to thank you for taking the time to meet with me. And I know right now is not the time for you to buy any product, but I do want to let you know that regardless, I enjoyed getting to meet you, and I hope that one day if you need anything, let me know. And regardless, take care and God bless. And two things happen. I send that letter, and I immediately feel better. Like, there's this emotional state change from one of despair and kind of frustration and anger to just kind of letting go and moving on. It was just a really freeing experience. And then I just never thought about it again for 2 years. And then lo and behold, I'm in college, and I get a call out of nowhere from this woman, and I answer the phone, and it says, the person says, "Is this Cutco John?" Because that's how everyone called me back then. I was like, "Yeah, this is Cutco John. How can I help you?" She said, "Well, you may not remember me. My name is Cynthia, and I tried to order some knives from you a couple of years ago, and I had to cancel." I was like, "Oh my gosh, of course I remember you, Cynthia. How are you?" She says, "Well, I'm doing a lot better now, and I'd like to place my order." I was like, "Oh, okay. Let's do it." And so then she starts listing off all the things that she wants, and I'm just taking note, and it's she keeps going and going, and she's listing out everything in our entire catalog. And I'm kind of blown away, because now she's about ready to purchase something that's 4 times the size of her original order. And I was really kind of confused. I'm like, why is this happening right now? And she says, "You might be wondering why I'm calling you." And what I couldn't tell you back then, I had to cancel my order, was because I was diagnosed with cancer. And I had found out I was going to have to leave my job, and my boys were going to have to move back into my house and help take care of me as I went through the treatment. And I just, as much as I didn't want to cancel my order with you, I just had to. And when I got your letter in the mail, it really blew me away, because I saw that you viewed me as more than a customer, but really as a human being. And I told myself that when I get healthy one day, I'm going to call this kid and I'm going to buy every damn knife he's selling. And that's what she did. And that experience, really just stuck with me as this kind of litmus test for how I run my business. Of, are people being viewed as a profit center, or are they viewed as what they are, which is human beings? And I think that has really helped in escalating and elevating my business to really where it is today, and in doing what I do.
I find that fascinating. Didn't we all start in door-to-door sales? That might be an assumption, and I'm not sure about the generations that have come after us, but I know I started in door-to-door sales. My husband started in door-to-door sales, and that is a hard job. If you think about it, you're interrupting people's days with that knock on the door. You are hoping that they are nice and you have an openness to have a conversation. And like Cynthia, it may be a great conversation, and others, there might not be an answer on the door. They may look at you through the window. They may just say no. And you hear this no, 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 no. And what I take away from your action is the fact that the one that bothered you is the one that you acted on. One, for a release. Two, it was almost like there was another call coming in from some other place that was like, this person needs to hear from you too. But it was that nag on your shoulder and the perception of, what did I do, that allowed a connection to be made. So I'm thinking about this from a personal awareness standpoint. That's pretty personally aware at 19.
Yeah. And I still, to this day, I'm like, I have no idea why I did it, because I look at I remember back when I was 18, and my mom, when I graduated high school, and my mom was on me to send thank you cards out to everyone who gave me a gift for like 6 months. And I just didn't want to do it. And I think for a lot of people, gratitude it comes off as almost as more of an obligation than it is an opportunity to make a connection. And I think that's where there's a slight disconnect for people, is that it's like this, oh, well, that's what I should do. I should write a thank you card because they did this thing. And when you look at, so like a great definition for the word gratitude is the emotion one feels when receiving a gift or experiencing something as a gift. And I remember as a little kid, Christmas time, being at my grandma's house, and I had 2 cousins, and I remember them getting a bunch more presents than me. And I still got presents, but they got more than me. And while I did get a gift, I was ungrateful in that day. I was sad. I was crying. I remember being like, oh, like I'm not, you love them more than me. And that even though I got a gift, because I didn't perceive it or experience it as a gift, there was no gratitude there. And so I think that definition of that's what gratitude is. It's the emotion one feels when you receive a gift or experience it as a gift. It gives you some kind of, like you said, the lens of appreciation. You get to view things differently. And that's really where the transformation occurs, as a business person.
And I'm thinking about business, and I'm thinking that moment, right? And having been in several enterprises in your career also, it makes me wonder, the first few years when a company has started, right, that we got to figure out how to keep the lights on. Are we doing the right thing? Can we even do that? It's very hard to squeeze anything else into that concept of, let's just get to tomorrow. Let's just get to tomorrow. And then, and I'm wondering if this is also parallels like personal development, not a psychologist, not evolutionary developmentally organized in any sense of the fashion from my studies. I see parallels though of we're very self-aware. We only care about what we care about. We want what we want. We have our own needs. And then there's at some point where this switch flips. And now there's like, oh, look, I know how to do this a little more automatically now. And in a business, oh, look, we can keep the lights on. We figured this out. And now, whether that's expansion in terms of product or people or just bottom line growth, whatever that may be, there opens up other avenues. And how much, and we're going to stick with open, how much openness is required to remember that gratitude has this big return, even if it's even if it's intangible?
Hmm. Well, it's an interesting thing where gratitude essentially becomes a decision, right? You just decide, I'm just going to choose to be grateful here. And I think that is essential, especially, in the earlier times of the business, because you might only have a couple of customers. So you really want to value and appreciate them.
Yeah.
And I think that also there's a multitude of ways in order to do that. And so this is a great insert for the definition of appreciate, or the Latin root of the word appreciate is appreciare, which literally means to appraise or to set the value of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means, like if you were going to sell a home or sell something, you hire somebody as an appraiser, and they come in with this list of questions about this item and declare, what is it worth, right? Well, how do you apply that to another human being? How do you apply that to a customer? And really what I believe is that it begins with curiosity and just being curious. And especially this is great for businesses, being curious about the customer experience. And this is one of the hardest things for people to do because number one, it does take some time, and two, it does take vulnerability because you don't always get the feedback you want.
Two things that we just sign up for every day, right?
Yeah. Feedback, right? We all love that. And Jack Canfield, one of his great quotes, he says, feedback is the breakfast of champions. I think for great business people, it's the same. And so what that looks like is taking, let's say you pick your top 5 customers, maybe you're only 5, I don't know. And then you just reach out. One of the things that we do in our business is we have, we call it a client experience call. So I have a client experience manager, and they reach out. It's not to try and sell them, not to try and upsell them or anything. It's literally to say, hey, and it's not a robot. It's not a survey. It's like, hey, we just wanted to check in. You just placed an order with us, just did some business with us. We just want to say thank you, number one. Overall, did the product show up? Yeah. Did you get everything? Okay, great. Hey, did you get a chance to try it out? Did you use it? Hey, have you had any trouble or any problems? Hey, here's something that we have found actually works really great, is if you do this and you do this and you do this. So, and by the way, just to help people in an awareness of what I do business-wise. So, I still technically work for the Cutco company, but in the business gift division. So I literally am a business gift consultant. So I guess another way to say that is I'm a gratitude salesman. So I help people say thank you for a living. So they buy large scale amounts of gifts from us. And so we have a process built in where we check in with them and say, hey, did you get a chance to give your gifts out? How was the experience with your clients and when you gave them out? Maybe did you have an interaction that didn't go as well as you were hoping? Oh, did you get this gift script that we have to help you most effectively deliver a gift to a client? And so we have all these things, and that all came from calling clients and then just having this, hearing from them like a lot of the same problem. Oh, well, I like to give the gift, but I don't know what to say when I give it. Well, that's interesting. If that's a repetitive problem, we should probably find a solution to that as a business people. If you want them to keep buying from us. And then here's really where to kind of bring this together, and I'll bring it back to you, Jess here. With the ability to have gratitude as an objective of the business, one of our goals is when people are doing business with us, for them to have an experience of, wow, I am grateful that is my salesperson. I am grateful to do business with these people because they think through the problems before I experience them. And so I have a great experience with this company. And it's funny because they might not even think about that consciously, like, oh, I'm grateful for this person, but they're grateful because there's a dozen other things that used to go wrong that no longer go wrong for anybody else in the future because you took the time to get the feedback from your clients and really fine tune your process to really be smooth.
You took your time. I love that. And drawing that out and thinking about that, there is an emotional intelligence about everything that you've been sharing so far. And to be in a place where you are teaching people to say thank you is a soft skill that is often overlooked. I mean, gratitude, we can have gratitude. I am thankful for, and sharing that with another, having a journal, recognizing that there's good things that happen all the time, being able to then reflect that back out and model it, being able to go one step further and have a conversation about it and find out people are uncomfortable. How do I say thank you? And so I just want to point out that soft skill that you are describing that has returned value over value over value in many different areas. That while gratitude and thanks is an intangible item, what I hear you saying is it turns into a tangible item in many different areas of life and business.
Yeah, it doesn't have to just be a thank you card. It doesn't just
Yeah.
have to be a gift. It could be a conversation. It could be a video you share. It could be, one of the simplest things is just being committed to just really making the best customer experience possible, such that they're like, wow, I'm just grateful to work with this company. And I think that was, and this leads into a bit of the Mr. Thank You project, or where did this whole thank you card thing come in was, it was in 2016, and I was, doing well in business, but life was tumultuous because I was married. We still am married.
I'm glad you changed that really fast then.
To distinguish, I am still married very happily. We had a 1-year-old son. We were preparing to buy a house. My wife decided to leave her job to become a stay-at-home mom. And we found out we were expecting our second child. So there's a lot going on, right? And becoming the sole provider for my family, I was very stressed out. And here I was, this gratitude salesman, not very grateful, which is kind of an ironic thing.
Wait, okay, so can we tear that apart just a little bit? You were a gratitude salesman and you were feeling ungrateful. What was the disconnect there?
Well, and that's where my job became about my job. It was just working to work to create income, because now I'm a sole provider, and now I've got my metrics are higher of what I have to produce. And now I've also got family time because, want to be around my wife and kids. And, there's this great quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is, I cannot hear what you are saying because who you are speaks so loudly. And I love that quote because for me, it's like, can customers feel that? Can clients feel my being and my essence in our interactions without them knowing everything else that's going on? Absolutely. And there's this great video by Simon Sinek on TED. It's called Start With Why. And that really kind of was a catalyst to this whole project, which was, he says, people don't care what you do. They care why you're doing it. And in business, people don't care what you're selling or what your business does. They care why you're running it. They care why you're in this job, in this business, in this company. And so I thought about that and I was like, well, why am I doing this? And a while ago, I made this commitment that getting gratitude with my work. And I thought, well, that sounds cool, but how are you embodying that? How can a client tell that about you without you telling them this is what I do? So how can I find a way to embody that value? Which is a great thing for businesses to consider. What are your highest values, and how are you and your employees embodying those values so your clients experience it without you having to send it on a postcard or write it on the wall in your building for them to see that's the values, but they can feel it from you.
Yeah.
And so I thought of what's a habit I can institute into my life that would help me elevate my level of gratitude every day. And that's where it was on October 8th of 2016. I committed to writing 5 thank you cards every single day for 365 consecutive days, which worked out to 1,800 notes of appreciation for a year.
In 1 year. And what are your biggest takeaways from that experience?
Oh man. Well, I want to tie into the emotional intelligence part that we were touching on, which is, it was a real litmus test for me in how am I doing every day? Because can you write a thank you card to somebody when you are in a negative or distressed state? And the answer is, if you want it to be good, no. You have to be in the right state in mind frame. So just think about that. Because just because, I decided to write thank you cards every day doesn't mean I didn't have traffic, doesn't mean I didn't have clients with issues, doesn't mean that, we didn't have vendor problems. Everything still existed as it did. I just now had a choice when it came down to, for me to sit down to write my thank you cards, that I had to get myself in a state. I remember a day, this is a great example. I remember a day where I was out in the field meeting with clients, and I was just rough day, just appointments canceling, interactions not working out to a deal, to driving home in traffic and just being like, oh, I just want this day to be over. But I hadn't written any thank you cards yet. And I was like, well, I still got to do that. So I'll get home a little early. Yeah. I'll write my cards, and that'll be that. Now, at this point, we had just gotten into our house in Dallas, Texas. And I neglected to text my wife that I was showing up early when she wasn't expecting me. So I open the front door, and immediately upon opening the door, the dog barks. And because the dog barks, it wakes up one of the sleeping children. And because it wakes up one sleeping children, that one starts crying and then wakes up the other one that my wife is nursing, about to fall asleep. And now we got two screaming children, a dog that's barking, and then my wife is staring at me with like laser beams, like burning a hole into my head. And I'm just like, oh, wow, I'm going to go upstairs in my office and write thank you cards right now. Like, I feel really grateful after just having a terrible day and then ruining my wife's life, right? So I go upstairs and I try to write these cards, and I just couldn't do it. I just literally could not be in the state to do it. And I just really thought about like just some emotional management tools that I've learned of like, okay, well, this isn't working. And what do I do here? So I just literally, I turned the lights off in my office. I laid on the ground and I processed the day. And I thought about what happened. And I just allowed, I think of like emotions like a snow globe, right? It's like you shake it up when there's a high intense emotional experience, and all the emotions are like the snowflakes are fluttering around, and they're going to keep going. And sometimes we try to stop them by like shaking it more, trying to deal with the problem. And it just makes it worse. It just elongates it. Yeah. And so I decided to just sit there and do a little meditation and just kind of just feel the feelings, notice what's going on, and just not judge it, just allow it to be. And just like a snow globe, eventually they just start to fall to the bottom. And you realize you didn't ruin your wife's life. You realize that you're still going to be in business. You realize that life is still going to be okay. You can still hit your goals. And I got up and I wrote a couple notes in my journal. And then I dove into my thank you cards and I wrote them in half the time, because I was in the right state to do it. So the reason I bring that up is because when we have a vision for what we're about, what our business is, and who, and that's why I say, like, I bring up the values, like, what are your values in your business? Because they're kind of like this thing that you get shoved through to be able to honor. And if you're not honoring it, you're out of integrity with it. And there's just this desire to pull yourself back in, figure it out. Like, you don't know necessarily how, but because you're committed to those values and honoring them, you start to build processes in your life to stay in integrity with that. And that was just an example of really how the whole process throughout the year, it wasn't perfect, but it required me to get better at managing my emotions to get myself into the right state to be most effective when I needed to.
You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. For additional perspectives on your growth strategy, Jess Dewell is your business advisor and consultant. Go to voiceofboldbusiness.com and click the Find Out More button to get started. Now, back to Jess.
You are listening to program 183, Lens of Appreciation, and I'm talking with John Isreal, author of Mr. Thank You, which contains life-changing stories from the impacts of genuine connection. Now, the first half of the program, we covered a lot of ground, and I want to start with this concept, which is near and dear to my heart, values. Do you have your own personal values?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about for myself, for my business.
Personally, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will you name and share one of them with us?
Sure. Well, and this is kind of an interesting one. It takes a little explanation for some people, but my highest value in my life is the full expression of my family.
And what does fullest expression of your family mean?
Yeah. That's where it's like, what does that mean? Well, I think of like growing up and as a kid, and there's that experience, we start to like pull away from really being fully ourselves. And so for me, I don't want that for my kids. I want them to fully be able to embody the best selves that they have. And so for me, what that looks like is embodying that myself. And so really being in my fullest expression. And that's where, me being a dad and being an example and doing what I do best. That's for me how that starts. And then it's just being aware and being present to my kids and my family of what they need and what they care about. And if they're being thwarted, maybe they're not getting enough sleep, I give you a great example. My wife and I, we sit down and talk all the time about how we're doing and doing a check-in, and we're big on like our energetic states and how we're doing. And she was just really struggling with sleep because this is kind of I'll be pretty transparent. So like my wife sleeps in one room with the kids and I sleep in a totally different room because I got to wake up and go to work, and she gets to be at home with the kids, which Doesn't mean she's just lying around, right? But the thing that I learned was that she was just really having a hard time getting the appropriate rest. And it's like, all right, well, we got to figure this out, right? Because if you can't be your best self because you're not getting enough sleep, we need to find a solution. And so we shifted around. So now we're in the reverse role. So I actually sleep with the kids. And the funny thing is because, she still nurses our youngest, and he can't do that with me. So he just goes back to sleep. And so now I'm in this new boat of, I'm putting the kids to bed. But it's really serving my wife. And so for me, that allows her to be her best self, which is in alignment with that value. So that's just like an example of what that might look like for, our family.
Nourishment is a word that comes to mind,
Yeah.
making sure that the actions, that what's actually happening is replenishable so that best self may come forward. And how it's really cool sharing that story, how it changed, how you actually made a physical role change to support each other and do that. Are you getting enough rest now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's a funny part about that. So I've had this constant complaint I've had, which is that I get enough sleep, but I go to bed too late. And so
Oh.
I would wake up late, and then I would, I have this thing I like to do called the Miracle Morning. I don't know if you know Hal Elrod or the Miracle Morning, but he's a good buddy of mine. And so I've been like, yeah, I know I'm always better when I'm doing my full morning routine, and I just can't do it because like whenever I wake up, the kids are up, and then we're going, and I can't do it. So I was like, if I could get up at like 5 a.m. every day, I could make that happen. And so the funny thing is we put the kids to bed at like around 8 o'clock. And for me, lying down with them and putting to bed, I just started falling asleep at 8. And so now I'm naturally waking up at 5 o'clock, and I'm like, no, I mean, I wasn't perfect rest, but I'm pretty well rested where I can get up and do the things. So last night was a little rough, I'll be frank, but
Was it?
it's generally,
Yeah.
it's generally really good.
Yeah, our son doesn't sleep with us anymore. And in fact, we did something similar, and we moved out of the room at the time it was time. So he didn't have to change his location. We changed our location.
That's interesting.
And it was super seamless. But I remember, and now, there are still nights, there are still sleepless nights. It doesn't matter how old we are, what ages our kids are. That's going to keep happening. And it's funny that you say that about falling asleep with them and then naturally waking up at 5. I wake up at 5 regardless of whatever time I go to bed. So if it's 2 a.m., I'm waking up at 5. If it's 8 p.m., I'm waking up at 5. And so I had to learn to go backwards and be like, well, I guess I've got to be brushing my teeth by 9:30 so that I can wake up at 5 and actually get rest. Because in my case, I'm an early bird to the T, and always have been, no matter what. And so there comes that self-awareness again, and a willingness. One of my values, high values, is curiosity, and a curiosity to be like, oh, maybe this isn't working. I wonder if I'm willing to face what that might actually mean. Am I willing to be open to that idea? And thank you cards, speaking of vulnerability, thank you cards puts ourselves in a vulnerable position. And since that's something it's a word we're getting used to as a society, it's a word that we must learn how to be and how to do, and we have varying reactions to it. Does your book, Mr. Thank You, give us some insights on how to get to that change of state of vulnerability to have a higher awareness and a higher presence?
It's kind of shocking to people sometimes when they hear about me writing all these cards. They're like, wow, that's interesting. And you're a guy. Yeah, it's like, apparently women are the ones that are allowed to be the most vulnerable or whatnot. But that's definitely a component. And I think what I learned about vulnerability in that process, or where I think it comes into play, is that this is really one of the hardest parts of expressing gratitude with people and writing a lot of thank you cards, is that not everybody responds. It's really interesting if in writing 1,825 thank you cards, I've got this really cool thing at my other office in my house where it's I call it the gratitude wall, and I've literally pinned up handwritten cards that I've received back from that time, and a presentation I was giving, or someone who received a card, or someone who heard a podcast or whatever, and they started their own thank you project journey. And they're always great and inspiring, but then there's this component of like, well, I didn't get 1,825 responses. I got maybe 100. which sounds like, wow, that's a lot. That's great. But it's like, well, what happened to the 1,725 others? So there's this component of like, well, I was vulnerable and I shared and I said, thank you. And I told them how much I loved them and cared about them. And then they didn't say anything back. And that was one of the hardest things. And I remember it was about month 2 of the project where I had sent out, 300 thank you cards and I'd gotten roughly about 20 replies back, which is about equivalent. It was about so it was about roughly about a 10% response rate, 5 to 10% response rate in general from the whole project. And I just remember being like this state of should I even do this? Does anyone care about this? And what I realized, and this is where it was a real transformative experience, is like, well, is this about you or is this about them? Are you really grateful or are you trying to elicit a response? And that's one of the hardest parts because, and this was a really valuable part of the book where I discuss what I call the gratitude loop. So just imagine, a half circle with a line and it says, thank you, right? And then on the top half of a circle, it says, you're welcome. And so a lot of times, like this is something I'll do with audiences sometimes where I'll say, hey, pick a partner, an A and a B. And A, I want you to look at B. And what I want you to do is I want you to say thank you and like really mean it, like really just say thank you. And B, I want you to do nothing, no reaction, no facial expressions, don't say anything, just stand there.
I couldn't do that. I'd fail at being a B.
And so what happens is they do it, and here's the reactions. A said, I say, how did that feel? And A says, like, I felt robbed. I felt like I was vulnerable and I was sharing myself and I got nothing back. And then you hear B, and then B is like, well, I felt so bad. I wanted to say something. And I'm like, well, and the only reason why is because I created an experiment where you were present to it and aware. But how many times in your life are people doing something or saying thank you or giving you a gift or doing something like that and you don't acknowledge it? And part of having people be more expressive of gratitude and saying thanks and sending gifts or doing whatever is to honor the gift when it's given, or to honor the thank you that's expressed. And so that's where that's one of the reasons why there's this like fear with the vulnerability part, because what if I'm vulnerable and it's not well received? And that's just a reality. And that's one of the things that it's called maturity. It's when you're
I'm not there yet.
It's when you're okay not needing to receive credit. You're okay not needing to hear anything back.
Actually, I'm teasing. I really am there yet, but it still hurts a little. Because honestly, you're talking about detaching, right? You're talking about doing something and being detached from the outcome. And that is a practice that I'm a people pleaser by nature, right? That was a habit and a coping mechanism that I adopted early on. And so as a people pleaser, when I say I'm not there, I say I'm really not there, because I'm not sure I can ever adapt and detach from a potential outcome, even though I feel really good about the fact that I was vulnerable, had a difficult conversation, reached out not knowing what was going to happen next. All of those things still apply. But I know as a people pleaser, that's kind of a hard line to follow. And I'm like, I'd like to think I was better than my 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And right. I know I'll be better 10 years from now.
Yeah. And this is, so can I share with you the moment of how that kind of shifted?
Yeah, I would love to hear it, because I could potentially use it right now.
So I was sitting down with someone in my family, and they were dealing with a sick spouse, and they had basically become the full-time caretaker, and they were just not doing well. They were just really hurting emotionally. They were just getting burnout. And I had sent this person a thank you card, and they never said anything. And I really poured it out. I was like really authentic, very genuine, very like saying how I felt about this person, what I loved about him. And I didn't hear anything back, and I never said anything. So I'm like, I'm not going to make this a deal. I'm just going to move on. And then in that conversation I was just listening with like, what's going on right now. Yeah. And I felt so bad because I got your card in the mail, and I so badly wanted to appreciate it, but I just couldn't because I was in so much pain. And I just thought about that, and I was like, wow, here I am thinking all high and mighty, well, they didn't say anything back, they must not care about me. No, that's because I'm focused on me. And there's this great acronym called SOS, which is Spotlight on Self, which means we're thinking too much about ourselves and not shining the spotlight on someone else. And for the first time that I actually got to shine the spotlight and just actually, like you said, be curious and listen to what they were saying, I got to really hear what was going on in their life. And we got to have this completely different but more valuable conversation than whatever my thank you card was. It was more of like about a human connection. So it just got me to really get over it. It just got me to be like, what's the intention? And that's always the litmus test question. What's the intention here? What's the objective? The intention is to express gratitude freely with no attachment. And if that's all that's the case, then that's what I need to practice. And that's where this became a practice. It wasn't just doing this. And that's where I think people get confused. They're like, how did you just sit down and write 5 cards every day? Because they think it was done the same way, which is like, thank you for that thing you did. Thank you for this. And it wasn't always just a thank you card for a thing that happened or a gift that was given. It was just genuinely trying to think of somebody and ask, what can I appreciate about this person? What do I love about them? What are they dealing with? What do they care about? What do they value? And honoring that in the letter that was sent. So if in the book, or if you're connected with me on Instagram, I take photos of a lot of my cards because I like to teach people through visuals, so you can see this is what I write. It's really funny. I talked to a guy the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, I really loved your book because it gave me some motivation because I saw that I saw the imperfections in all your cards. Like, you don't have the greatest handwriting," and I was like, "Oh, I think that's a compliment." But whatever had him more comfortable writing the cards himself. But I tried to write them a little bit more full than just a simple, hey, thanks for this, because I want people to see like it's about acknowledgement and really seeing somebody for who they are in their greatest contributions.
There are so many things going through my head right now. And this practice, the journey that you've been on because of this practice and being able to get to share this, really, in the essence, if we were to break down practice, isn't it just a discipline to do something continuously?
Yeah, and that's all it is. It's like it's just like if you were to take one thing, and that's where what I really enjoyed about it, and it was kind of like archetype. It was architecturally designed into the process. So there were some rules, by the way, which I think people can adopt to a different project. Which the rules were, I had to hand write 5 cards every day, so they had to be handwritten. They couldn't be an email or a text or a video. I had to finish all my cards before I went to bed, so the 5 had to be written before I was in bed. So I couldn't write 35 on Sunday. They had it reset every day. Yeah. I could write a max of 3 cards per person, which means I could write as many as I want to my wife or my mom or whoever, but I could only count up to 3 because I could see that it's starting to lose value, because I know myself. And if I run out of time, I'm like, oh, who do I got to write a card to? Oh, I'm going to write it to my wife again. Hey, thanks for picking up the almond butter, because I like smooth instead of chunky. Like, I don't know. They get lame. They would lose their value. And the last rule was, for any and every day that I miss, I would donate $1,000 to charity. Mm-hmm. And so that actually came out of a conversation with my business coach where, I was telling him about this project, and he was like, wow, it sounds amazing. Like, what happens if you miss a day? And my first reaction was, well, I'll donate $100 to charity. I was all proud of that answer. And he says, add a 0. I was like, why would I add a 0? That's $1,000. You want me to donate $1,000 to charity? He's like, well, I don't want you to have to do anything. But let me ask you this. If it was just $100, how likely are you going to donate $100 or a couple $100 this year anyways? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. He's like, well, then you're giving yourself a way out. If you are committed that you'll donate $1,000 anytime you miss a day, how many days you're going to miss? And I said 0. He's like, all right, then add a 0. And that's what I did. And so that's where that came into play. And the reason I share that is because there was accountability. It wasn't just this, oh, like I'll do them as often as I can, or I missed a couple yesterday, so I'll catch up. So we become creative when we have borders. I'm from a family of artists, and that's what my mom always kind of chanted to me of like, don't hate your circumstances. It's all part of your canvas. Yeah, every canvas has borders. If the canvas has no borders, then it's hard to make art because you don't know where it stops and where it begins. And so it was this kind of this beautiful analogy of as in writing these cards, I had my canvas, 5 every day, and they could go to anybody. max of 3 per person, handwritten, and had to be done before I went to bed. And so and there inside of that, there were so many things that occurred that really like just kind of forced me again through the process that was really interesting. And I think people can do that with something else.
And recognize that when you embody something for an entire year, there's only one thing to do, which is to grow. You just don't know which direction or how, or the quantity or the amount of expansion that might occur. But making a commitment like that, it's vulnerable in and of itself, because you're saying, all right, I know what I've said I'm going to do. I don't have any idea what the results are of what I'm doing.
Right. And it's almost this like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. Right. But when you commit to it and you kind of put your tush on the line, you put your butt on the line and say, I'm raising my hand, I'm committed to this. Yeah. And then suddenly it shows up where you're like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Well, it's like, well, okay, well, if I did do it, how might I do it? What are 3 different solutions here? What are some options?
Where have you seen this add the most value in your role as a gratitude salesperson?
Yeah. So there's a chapter in the book I wrote called The ROI of Gratitude, which was, it was kind of a hard chapter to write because there's this part of like, oh, like that's gross. Like the return on investment of gratitude, isn't that inauthentic? Isn't that opposite from what you say you're doing? But there's just also a truth to, I get that there's a lot of busy business people and they're gonna be like, hey, John, this is great, you did that, but how did it really benefit you? Where did you make more money? Did you get more clients? Yada, yada. So here's a couple of things that I got. Did we make more money because of it? Absolutely. There was a cost. It did cost me, I think I ran the numbers, it's roughly close to about $2,000 for the year to do the project, buying all the cards, buying stamps, all that kind of stuff. And as far as did I make that money back? 100%. I had one client who got a thank you card from me a week after they had placed an order, and they were cracking up about it because I just, and that's the thing with a good thank you card to a client, is just make something relevant for the interactions. They know a robot didn't write it and you actually wrote it. And we sell knives, so I sent a Band-Aid with it, and he thought that was hilarious. And so he calls me up 24 hours later and he buys another order 4 times the size of what he had just bought, that basically covered the commissions, covered everything that I had spent for the entire year from that one sale. And there's multiples of those throughout the year. One that's really interesting that tends to hit a lot of people here is the attrition rate. So every business has a cancellation ratio, and we should all know that. If you don't, you should definitely dive into those numbers. If you're in membership sites, how long does someone stay a member? If you sell a repeat recurring product that someone buys and then they just stop buying at some point, when is that? Why is that? Or if you're in retail and someone for every 100 transactions, how many of those transactions are returned back to you? So it's an important number to know. And so I had, for me in my business, it was about, at its worst, it was about 10%. 10% of sales would go back. At its best, it was about 5%. Of what I got my cancellations down to. And what was really, and I couldn't tell this answer until the end of the year when I could run all the metrics, but we had dropped that cancellation ratio from 5% down to 2.5%. And when in running the metrics of what is the additional income we made by sales we didn't lose, it was roughly about $8,000. That was interesting. And I think that people don't think of it on that side of like, money you don't lose is money you make. And there's also a compounding long-term, thing you can dive into of like, well, then they're actually worth a lot more because then they keep buying and yeah. But that was for me a very direct correlation because nothing else changed in my business. I was doing the same events. I was seeing similar clients. I mean, nothing really changed except for that one thing. And that made a big difference in as far as like, what did I actually get back? And also community-wise and opportunity, really expanded. Obviously the Mr. Thank You Project got featured on the news and all sorts of things inadvertently. And so created some publicity, but it wasn't because I was like, I'm going to try and get on TV. I'm going to try and do this. It was like, I'm just going to do this because it feels right. It's in alignment and I think it's going to be good for all involved. And I think that's how good things are designed to spread. And that's continuously how it's been going right now. I just spoke at a church earlier this morning to a group of moms because I was featured in a local magazine, and the head person called me and said, hey, we don't have a big budget, but we'd love to have you come and share your story. And it's just a lot of really interesting things show up when you're just committed to being aligned with your highest values.
Isn't that amazing how that works? You shrugged. And so everybody who's listening, there was a pause and it was a shrug. And it was a shrug of knowing, and of course, this is the way that it is. Now having been through that path. And I find it fascinating. And if I were to say, so what can I do? What can our listeners do to start this practice, to find out where they figure out where the boundaries are and get around them? How can they start a practice of gratitude like what you've done?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I probably stated a little differently for business owners than I would just, anybody else.
So if you give us both answers, one for individuals and one for business owners.
I did 5 cards every day for a year. I tell most people, don't do that. It was really hard. It took an hour and a half every day, scaled out over 365 days. That was a combined 22 24-hour days of writing handwritten cards throughout the year. It's almost a month. It's kind of insane. And not everyone has that time, and not everyone's committed to what I was doing. But part of the reason of doing that was so that people could hear it and be like, God, I would never do 5 a day, but I could do 1. And that was the goal, was to make it extreme so people can pull back and say, I could do 1 a day for a year, or I could do 1 a day for 30 days. I would recommend start with like 1 a day for 30 days and kind of see how you feel. It's a great thing one of my friends taught me about eating good food, is he said, eat something and then set a timer for 30 minutes. And then when it goes off, ask yourself, how do I feel right now? And so with regards to the same thing, if you're going to write 1 card every day, pay attention to how do you feel afterwards? What starts to shift in how you experience the world? What starts to shift in your relationships? And there's a lag time. I'll tell you, it's not, and that's where like that 2-month mark was really tough for me, because I was still inside of a lag time. And yet at the same time, a week later, I get a call from a friend who's like, oh my God, your card was the perfect time. And you have no idea how much that meant to me. And I was just going through some stuff, and that was just perfectly timed. So I didn't plan that. You can't plan this stuff. So what I just tell people is just do your best with what you got. If you can do 1 card a day, every day for 30 days, that's great. If you can do 1 a day for a year, go for that. Whatever connects with you and you think you can follow through on, go for it. So do that. Second thing is, I would look at, if I was in business, I would look at how can I build gratitude into my process. And this is a really interesting thing I just experienced. So I had gone out to get some pictures framed for our anniversary. And there were 2 great photos my wife loves. They were our Christmas card photos a couple years. And it was just this random frame shop I literally found on Yelp. And I was like, oh, that's the closest one. I'll go there. And I go there, and, I needed them pretty quick, and they turned it around, and they did a good job. The photos look fantastic. I'd probably go back again. Out of nowhere, I randomly get a thank you card from them. They had no idea who I am or what I do. So this is really interesting. And I opened the card, and I wish I had it to show you, but it was literally just printed on regular printer paper. And there was one part that was a square that was basically like on the front of it, it just said thank you. And it had like their logo, and then you open it up, and then there's 2 parts. And there was the top part that was, or the bottom part was just a generic, like, thank you for your business. We appreciate you stopping at Easy Frames or whatever. Please visit us again. And then above that, they had a part, and this is all typed in, and it said, John, I just wanted to say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to take care of your Valentine's gift. You have a beautiful family. We hope your wife loves the photos. See us again sometime. And then hand signed by Carol, the lady who runs the shop. And I get this card, and I'm just like, wow, they just connected with me as a human being, not as a customer. And that's a big challenge people think of. That's one of the challenges is scale. How do you have a great customer experience? How do you scale that? Well, so to sit down and handwrite a card to every single person, and then, it's cumbersome, right? Or it can be. So she found a way to build it as part of the process, because it was part of her process that as I was filling out here, fill out this form, put your name and address and phone number and email. Well, there's printing. I'm picking it up here. Why do they need my address? I didn't think about that, but that was built into their process. And then because they know they're going to take that information, they're going to make this card. And she might have even done it while I was still in the store, because it was fresh in her head, and she just typed it up, and it was in a little, if I showed you, you'd be so unimpressed. But the experience of a customer, again, where I go back to like, okay, I'd probably use them again. Now it's like, I would definitely use them again. And why would I ever use anybody else? Because they just connected with me better than any frame shop I've ever been to. And that's where I say, look into your process and how can you bring gratitude to interactions, to not have it be company customer, but really human being and human being. Because that's where we get driven back to, as far as like, who do we trust, who do we know that knows us and is going to not view us as just another customer, like another paycheck, but really is another person. Kind of comes full circle back to how we started this show. But that is where I think that business owners can really can bring this to their what they do. So bring it to clients, also bring it to vendors and employees. I can't tell you how many times I wrote a card to an assistant who helps me process paperwork or any number of things to people. And when it came down to, I needed a favor, I needed like a little extra fast shipping, I needed something handled above every other order that was ahead of me, there was this willingness to do it, because who am I? Am I just another customer? No, I'm a customer who was also really grateful and wrote them this great card that they like, wow, no one's ever written me a card before. So then when I call in, I call it the cell phone test, right? If your call comes into somebody's cell phone and they look at it and they see your name, what's the reaction? Is it, oh, they're just going to ask me for something again, click send a voicemail? Or is it, oh, it's John, I love John, what does John have to say? Hey John, how's it going? And that's really where I think that you're going to start to see the difference in how people start to view your business based on how you choose to view other people and how you choose to interact with them.
What makes it bold to view the world through a lens of appreciation?
Can you clarify that question? That's a good question. I just want to clarify it.
Okay, we're going to say that this is our last question of the show. Well, so what you did is different than anybody else has ever done. And we're talking about having switched from showing gratitude and having a practice to actually flipping around and letting people recognize that they're appreciated. So when you do that and you're viewing the world that way, like you do now, what makes you different? Yeah.
So this is a great quote that kind of came out sometime in the project, which is that, if you ask people like, what's your business goal or why are you doing what you're doing? And you ask them over and over, well, why? Well, why do you want that? Why do you want more money? Why is this important? Ultimately they're going to tell you because they think it's going to make them happy, or it's going to fulfill them somehow, or they believe it will. Well, if fulfillment is the finish line, then gratitude is the starting line. And so I think what it is the lens of appreciation. It's really the practice of loving where you are. And that is great because whether you achieve that goal or not, you're happy. And when you achieve that goal, you're happy. And so and ultimately, if that's what the goal is, then you might as well start now.
You heard it right here with John Isreal. You'll find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/p183. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 183. You may also search the site for John Isreal, Mr. Thank You, and the name of the program, Lens of Appreciation. Now it's your turn. Keep this conversation going by telling us what you think. What are your experiences, both through personal transformation of a practice like gratitude, writing thank you notes, genuine connection, and how you feel when you receive that type of appreciation from another. Rate this program on iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever you're listening and watching us right now. You can learn from John's experiences and the conversation here. Use it practically today, tomorrow, and the next day to improve where you're at, what you're trying to do, the problems that you are attempting to solve, and the connections that you wish to strengthen. And we want to know, how do you foster your lens of appreciation?
The voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. When you aren't seeing the growth results you want, it's time to get an outside perspective. To discuss your specific situation around growth strategy, work with us. Visit voiceofboldbusiness.com and click Find Out More. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.